So, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on the Central Budget 2010-2011. So, we all realize in the new post-2008 financial crisis world, few countries have the growth potential that India has. We have a relatively untouched and efficient financial system, a confident and competitive private sector, significant long-term demand for infrastructure investments and services that remain huge and untapped, a demographic profile that points to at least 2 or 3 decades of strong consumption economic growth. So this is the background, this is the inherent opportunity, and the reason that India has the potential to be a real economic powerhouse and use its economic power and growth to address the destitution and poverty that still afflicts a majority of our citizens. So what ought to be the government's role given this background? A government that seemingly has a broader mandate to effect some real change and also, in their own words, are unfettered by their former political partners. So it is to create a framework and basket of policies and strategies that fully exploits this inherent potential of our country and do so over the next 4 years. So to be fair, there are a number of positives in this budget that need highlighting. The Honorable Finance Minister has articulated 10% growth as his objective. That is good. For the first time in some years, the growth in expenses is growing slower than the growth in projected revenues, a critical element of bringing fiscal responsibility to our finances. The budget also, sir, for the first time, has increased outlay to CAPEX, capital expenditure, from 1.87% to 2.16%. This is an important structural improvement in government spending. Also, sir, after several years of increase of debt service to GDP ratios, interest payments as a percentage of GDP this year are showing the first signs of declining. All very necessary and positive changes to the structure of the budget. It is left, of course, to be seen how many of these turn out to be real, given their dependence on the revenue targets that the Finance Minister has outlaid. So, the challenges for the Finance Minister and the government are quite obvious. They are threefold. One, fiscal consolidation, and many colleagues have already discussed that. Two, the potential slowdown of investment flows through the coming tightening monetary policy cycle and uncertain global environment. Three, the strong inflation bias in our economy that has remained unattended to since mid-2006. It is in this context, sir, that we should examine the budget. Shorn of the rhetoric and the spin that nowadays usually accompanies this process, this budget, in my opinion, sir, my humble opinion, does not meet the test of setting a clear direction for the next 4 years. Yes, it does do a number of things, like make a more credible roadmap to fiscal consolidation, as I've already mentioned before. But unfortunately, sir, there is no big idea in this budget which was critical to set the directional cue for the next 4 years. So I'd like to say a few things about the 3 challenges. Firstly, sir, fiscal discipline. Even in the area of fiscal consolidation, sir, with the greatest respect to the Honorable Finance Minister, I am reasonably confident that the time will prove that he took the wrong turn on the fork of fiscal consolidation. The process of fiscal consolidation and reforming subsidies should have and could have been harmonized, and indeed, in my opinion, represented a huge opportunity to restructure subsidies. If politically you have chosen to increase fuel prices, the correct and the sustainable way to have done this would have been to allow the oil marketing companies to increase pricing, reduce under-recoveries, and therefore reduce the funding pressures on the government, as the Kirit Parikh Committee report has suggested. So this fiscal jugglery, and unfortunately, sir, this is what it is, does not address the liabilities and losses of the OMCs and other government-linked companies, which, given the sovereign nature of these companies, can never be allowed to default, and therefore are, and we cannot run away from this, they are government liabilities. Pushing the debt and the liabilities off the government balance sheet and into OMC balance sheets will not pass the test for investors who closely view our economy. So the simple rule for fiscal management is this. It's the common sense economics that millions of homes and businesses practice all over our country. Spending has to be aligned to revenues. Every rupee of the rupees 11 lakh crore rupees that will be spent this year should be spent wisely. We cannot continue going on borrowing from the future to finance the present. With the proliferation of entitlements and the consequent profligate spending that has become the hallmark of this government, it is clear that public spending will continue to increase year on year. That in itself is not a bad thing. As long as spending is efficient, and that there is accompanying and sustainable top-line growth and outcomes as well. But this critical issue, so important to our long-term fiscal sustainability, that of spending reforms and restructuring, unfortunately finds very little mention in the budget. So secondly, the issue of economic growth, and I'll be very brief on this. As we all know, sir, our economic growth has been fueled primarily by the investment economy, which has in turn created the consequent jobs and consumption economy. There is real risk about these investment flows given the global uncertainty, as well as there is an opportunity. I hope the Finance Minister focuses on this as a clear area of focus. To boost our economic growth amidst a tightening credit cycle by our central bank, we need significant FDI flows into our economy. We must have a target of $40 to $50 billion of FDI this year if we are to realistically achieve our growth and move towards the 10% growth trajectory. And I would request the Finance Ministry that they coordinate the public policy actions of the various economic ministries and align them to this objective, and not have the current situation of each ministry doing its own thing and going in its own direction and pace. So the last point, thirdly, the inflation. So the inflation bias in our economy is evident, and the budget unfortunately does not address it. I have been saying myself, sir, for some years now that we are not addressing inflation as a structural problem. This challenge of demand-supply mismatch-led inflation was brought to the attention of this government way back in 2006-2007, when inflation was first rearing its head. The solution should have been thought of then, and we would not be discussing it today as if it was a brand new phenomenon. Any economy that has been structurally aligned to high levels of growth needs to ensure that the supply side is managed as is the growth. This is common sense economics, and given the proliferation of economists and wise men that seem to speak on behalf of the government, I find it surprising there has been so little action on this front, including in this budget. So let me end by saying, sir, this is a transition year globally. This budget is hopefully a transition budget as well. In this House, I cautioned the government in 2007, sir, that it was not a time to be complacent and to believe that the tomorrow will take care of itself. I fear that the government is getting complacent and falling into a comfort zone again, being taken in by statistics and numbers.
Please conclude.
Yes, sir, that economists are famous for. And this despite the promise in last year's presidential address that the dreary sand of dead habit will be left behind. So let me end by saying, I hope and I wish the Finance Minister luck. I would also urge him to use his credibility and respect to get the many parts of the government that seem to have slipped into a comfort zone kick-started. He needs to use his goodwill and respect to make this happen and not allow this year to be a year of lost opportunity. Thank you, sir.